I mean, this is an old slide that, obviously I'm based here in Silicon Valley, surrounded by companies like Google and the likes of Apple and, all these hot companies that have changed our worlds, whether it's the smartphone that we use every day or whether it's the Google search that we use every day to find out information. And that's kind of changed our lives. It wasn't always that way. The biggest companies in the world were probably more on the energy side. And, what if we were to look forward into the future of what will be the biggest companies and who will be the most dominant companies in the agriculture sector in 2030? This is, our view of this kind of same chart. It's maybe a little bit, I'm not saying it's exactly going to be like this, but I can tell you that, you're going to see some of these technology companies playing a much greater interest in agriculture. And I think that's a good thing. And I think the likes of Amazon and Google have already started this. I know Microsoft have been working on their FarmBeats platform, but I think there's going to be new players that are going to enter the market, whether it's, on the next generation proteins, whether it's an Impossible Foods or Beyond Meat, or whether it's on the bioscience area with companies like Indigo or controlled environment farming. These could be the next generation of companies that could be the big changers, for the agriculture industry. And, I think that the agriculture, big corporations are sitting up paying attention, whether it's, the Bayers, the BASFs, the John Deeres, Nutrients, Cortevas, they're looking outside their four walls for innovation. They're not just doing it all internally. And for them to be able to survive, through the next decade or couple of decades, innovation is going to play a key role. And, innovation is going to play a key role for all of us. And, the great thing with this industry, that we all work in is, there is a greater purpose in terms of what we're doing, in terms of, the health of the planet, the health of the soil. We're affecting people's lives in terms of what we do and how we grow and how we deliver. So therefore, innovation is going to continue to play a great role. And that's something that, gets us excited, makes us passionate about what we're doing. We love seeing more entrepreneurs. We every year we go through and evaluate all these technologies. We're now going into Thrive 7. These are the 6 cohorts that we go through. And, we've probably over 500 companies from around the world that want to come onto our program, and they're going to be companies that are going to change the world in some way. So it's an exciting time for agriculture. It's a tough time for agriculture, obviously, in the current environment, but if we're not innovating, it's going to be super hard to try and solve some of these challenges doing the same things the same way. And I guess I'll leave my talk there. So thank you for that conversation. I know that Denise is going to have a chat in terms of either any questions or areas that we want to chat about.
Great, thank you very much, John. I do have a couple of questions. One, just before we go on to some of the questions related specifically to the presentation, you did mention the Thrive challenge that you have on the go. We've posted a link for more information. We've also posted information in the files, but I thought maybe you could just touch a little bit more on what that is in Canada, and how people can participate and how they can get involved.
Yeah, so the Canadian challenge is really for us. We want to find the best entrepreneurs across Canada, and whether they're in universities or whether they're entrepreneurs working, developing a new technology that's trying to solve some of the challenges in the agriculture sector. And the reason that we're doing a specific Canadian challenge is that for the last 2 years we've seen some really great companies come through from Canada. So therefore we wanted to put more emphasis right across Canada. And obviously for any entrepreneur, we'll be making investment of $100,000. They've got come onto our program for 4 months. They get to meet customers in terms of the farmers that we work with, the corporations that we work with. They get an opportunity to get showcased at the Forbes AgTech Summit. So it's a great opportunity. And, last year it was won by a Calgary-based company. So, you have a good track record already.
Yeah, that's good news. We're always very proud of our Canadians. We know we do well. Uh, with regard to some of the slides in your presentation, one of the questions that I had was, as a result of the global pandemic, what ag and food industry trend do you think became the most accelerated? I know there were trends already, but as a result of the pandemic itself, what do you think became more accelerated because of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that, I mentioned a little bit of this. Obviously, if you look closer to the consumer, food delivery, online delivery, has accelerated, I would say, by 5 years. This is a significant, move forward. If I look through the supply chain, I think the heightened awareness in terms of food safety and some of the areas that got exposed, you're starting to see companies now look at digital transformation and also robotics automation. If you have, less, touch points in the process, you're minimizing, the exposure there. So we're seeing a lot more activity in the whole robotics area, as well. And I think that also goes into the field. Certainly here in California, labor has already been a challenge, but in the COVID, pandemic, picking strawberries or picking fruit or vegetables, it still has to happen. And you're now seeing an adoption of more robotics and automation in there. So they would be the three biggest ones, that we've seen, across the board.
Okay. I thought maybe now, if it's all right, John, I might share the results of the first poll question.
Yeah.
Because I think they might have results that might surprise everyone. So,
okay.
Give me 2 secs. Oops. Yep. Sorry, everybody. So the results were that the participants believe the biggest challenge isn't the actual connectivity problems, which is a huge issue in rural US and rural Canada, but actually the learning curve.
Yeah.
And it's the learning curve for farmers to learn how to integrate all this data, learn how to integrate all this information and make business decisions. You talked about it a bit during the presentation.
Yeah.
Do you have any insights on, like just small things that farmers can do, but what the industry can do overall?
Yeah, I'm not surprised by this. We did something similar type poll a few weeks ago here in the US. Same thing came out, and I think right now, I've obviously been in the depths of all these different technologies, and even with that, it's a challenge to try and navigate through all these thousands of different startups and new technologies, and I think right now farmers are overwhelmed, with the different solutions that are out there, and they need education. Like every big company has an IT department, or they have, an organization that's able to support them. That's not the case in every single farm. Obviously big farms, are well equipped. I think there needs to be either government-based or a place to go for farmers to be able to find information. Not just to kind of see, oh, show me, 100 or 500 different companies. Show me the top 10, so kind of like the quantification and the qualification of what's the best solution to use. Farmers need to know that. And I think, there's so much regulation across the food sector. There's so much regulation across the agriculture sector, yet all these new technologies are kind of like unregulated. I'm not asking for regulation, but farmers need to kind of know, okay, what's the best solution I could put in place for a robotic, and they need to have a go-to place. And if it's not government-based, it's an opportunity for some of the farm associations to be able to collaborate there. And that's something we're actually very interested in this, to be able to, because we have a lot of the information, and it's something that we'd be interested in collaborating with the industry to be able to provide us insights in terms of what to use and where to use it.
Okay. Then I'll switch back kind of
Okay.
presentation mode. You talked about robotics. You talked a little bit already about how COVID has accelerated things from a robotics perspective. You talked about working with Driscoll and the raspberries and strawberries. Do you have any more insights about the robotics and how, you know, we've seen in the agriculture industry in particular, automated tractors that are operating without a human in them, those kinds of things. What else might we see in that perspective from robotics in agriculture?
Yeah, I think you're going to see like the big players, the John Deere's, the Kubotas, you know, their mainstream business is going to continue to get automated. But I think you're going to see a new generation of either swarm robotics or smaller, you know, useful, you know, robotics. Like there was a company that we brought through a few years ago called Burrow. And it's literally like a small little robot that follows you around in the field, just like a dog would follow you. And you can put your machinery or your, you know, your fruit, etc., on it, and it'll go back and bring it back to your farm. Like simple things like that, you know, you're going to see, you know, happen. We've worked with a company called Tortuga. They're picking strawberries. So, you know, picking strawberries isn't kind of like, you know, a huge machine. It's a very delicate and focused machine. And then, you know, companies like Soft Robotics, who've been getting a lot more attention, more on the supply chain side. You know, they're working with the likes of Taylor Farms, which are a big, you know, fresh food, $4 billion fresh food company here in the US in vegetables. You know, the production line, being able to softly pick up the produce without damaging is important. So, you know, you're going to see things like that, simple weeding devices, you know, not a big, huge, but very important in terms of being able to weed. So I think you're going to see a series of different, you know, kind of the Swiss Army knife of robotics starting to kind of play out over the next couple of years.
Okay, I like that one, Swiss Army knife. I thought I'd share the second survey results. So if everybody can bear with me once again. So what will be the largest driver? And the answer was, everybody thinks it's profitability. So not sure, ease of customer use, cost reduction, they were up there too, but certainly everybody thinks the driver is always profitability, right? Our own bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, in the end of the day, farms are businesses and they have to make money. If they're not making money, they can't meet the bills. And, you know, ultimately, if you're going to adopt anything into your business, it's not going to be the adoption of, oh, it's easy to use, or it's going to be about how can I reduce, is this going to reduce the use of inputs? Is it going to reduce, you know, water usage? Is it going to reduce labor usage? So I think it, you know, this is such a key thing. And I think this is where some entrepreneurs struggle a little bit with, you know, they're kind of selling the excitement of a technology and the ease of use of a technology. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't save any money, you're not going to use it. And you know, I'm not surprised by that. But interesting, you know, you can see number two, it needs to be something that is easy to use. You know, don't give me a complicated you know, device that, you know, or you know, a piece of software or platform that is difficult to engage with. So, you know, those two are very tightly, you know, kind of looked at. And I think as you're going to start seeing companies and startups kind of being able to deliver on profitability, you're going to see ease of use start to kind of rise up and be a differentiator. That's why companies like Apple, you know, they make it so easy for you to use the device. You know, companies that are selling into farms need to make it easy to use. You don't have time to be, you know, doing a 10-week program to learn how to use something, you know, so, okay.
Yes, all right, so I've got a question from the audience actually, John. So I've got actually a number of questions from the audience. What crops will lend themselves best to vertical farming?
I think it'll be specialty crops, you know, kind of more the high value, you know, crops. You know, today you're seeing more leafy greens. It's going to be tough for vertical farms to make money out of leafy greens. So their transition into berries, tomatoes, I think that will be the niche. And I don't think it's going to be suddenly, a big shift over to everything is going to be in a vertical farm. I think we already have a demand supply gap, and I think it's going to solve that. And also there are areas around the world that you can grow, and I think it's going to be able to help grow in areas, whether it's in the Middle East or areas like that might adopt controlled environment farming maybe even earlier than here.
Okay. So then a question from Reading University, from Tamazan. How do you feel about DIY tech such as Raspberry, PIS and Arduinos?
Yeah. That's a good question. Farmers are comfortable, working and being, how would I say, creative in terms of, being able to kind of either create something themselves or build something out. I think the problem with that is when you're building and running a business at scale, you need to have platforms that are enterprise ready, platforms that are robust, that are not going to have problems down the road. So I think that the technologies that will be adopted will be technologies that have a very strong base in terms of its technology and its ability to be able to scale. Maybe with some of the smaller farms, some of these kind of devices might be useful, but I think that it's going to have to be cost effective, and it's also going to have to be able to scale with a farm.
Okay. What percentage of the startups in Thrive are high value crop versus broadacre?
Oh, I don't know if I can even answer that question because we got so many. I would say that there's definitely more of these companies pointed at specialty crops first because of, there's more economics there to try and do it. I would say it's probably 60-40. A lot of what we have in the irrigation side, our companies in the farm management side are very applicable, to row crop for sure. Robotics automation is a little bit, more focused on specialty crop right now. But I'd say in a couple of years' time, you're going to see that transition over.
Okay. What are the pricing models your technology companies are using most? Is it licensing or subscription?
Yeah, it's subscription. And, like if I was a farmer, I wouldn't feel comfortable. Well, this happens today, but having to buy a bunch of equipment, stick it in the fields, whether it's sensors and then having a software and then having to pay whatever, 100 grand or 50 grand or whatever it is, like that's not a sustainable model. If the startup is basically being able to deal with the cost and provide the service to the farmer and reduce the cost, that's going to be the win-win. And that's what we're seeing more of these business models, come out. And likewise, in robotics automation, it's a similar thing, so I would say subscription is probably the top of the list.
Alrighty, and then when will farmers be able to monetize their data instead of always being a data buyer?
Yeah, I mean that's a $64 million question. I think that now that you're seeing more of the bigger kind of players, come in, whether it's the likes of a Google, they have capabilities to be able to monetize this. I would say we're still a couple of years away from this. I also think that I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be more regulation going to come in place in terms of data in this space. I mean, I hate saying it, but it's a little bit of the Wild West at the moment in terms of just this data in fields. And it's going to take a combination of some regulation combined with some maybe bigger new entrants that are big companies that have the ability to be able to monetize this for farms. But I still feel it's a couple of years away until it actually is meaningful for farmers.
Alrighty, and then we're probably at the last question, John. If you could put your clairvoyant hat on, In 5, 10, or 20 years from now, what do you think the significant changes you believe are going to be in agriculture, particularly here in North America?
I mean, we've probably covered a few of these, already. I think that automation, robotics automation, I think is going to continue to be a big trend. You're not going to see robots walking around the fields, but I think you're going to see a whole cluster of different tools and equipment that is going to support the farmer. I think the second thing is this point that we talked about earlier in terms of, the digitization, or, the ability to be able to have data to manage, your business. I think it's going to be a situation where farmers are not going to feel uncomfortable either sharing data, that it's going to be protected. And that will actually make us more productive in the end. And so I think we're going to get over that hump over the next couple of years. And I think it's going to provide more value to the farmers in terms of, what inputs they're using, how they're able to control and manage their business. So I think data is going to play a big role. Think about it like the Google for data. We didn't think about that 20 years ago when it didn't exist, but it's going to be very impactful. So I think kind of data, robotic automation, and then the control environment, control environment or vertical farming, is very much at its infancy. And I see that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, probably more on the specialty crop area, but I think that's going to be, a significant business in 5 years' time.